What up, guys? Have you ever had a prospect at the end of one of your sales calls say that, look, this sounds really good, I really want to do it, but I gotta talk to somebody else before I make a decision? So we call those types of objections support objections, which essentially means they're offloading the decision-making authority to somebody else who's outside of the sales call. You know, maybe it's an executive leadership team like a CMO or CTO, maybe it's their spouse, maybe it's their business partner who's not really involved in that part of the business, but they're still a business partner, 50-50 relationship, something like that. And essentially what happens is they offload the decision-making authority to somebody else, and then the deal kind of goes into this purgatory stage. And more often than not, if you're like most salespeople or most entrepreneurs who are still selling on the phone, those deals are some of the most deals that slip through the cracks. Well, in this video, I am going to show you how to handle those types of objections so that one or two different things start to happen. And either number one, we can actually evade that objection, handle it, and still get some form of commitment on that first call. Or number two, if it's logistical and there's no way we can get a decision on that very call, we can set up the next step in the sales process in such a way in which it's gonna have a very, very high conversion rate, whether that's a second call with a business partner or a spouse, maybe that's just a follow-up after they do a check-in, maybe you have to pitch a board or a leadership team, executive team, whatever. So I'm gonna splice over to a scripting and walk you guys through exactly what to say in those types of situations. And then also, if you want that scripting, make sure you comment Google Doc below and my assistant will reach out and get that to you. So let's splice over to my office and get this going. All right, how to handle the spouse or partner objections. So what we're gonna cover is basically an overview of where we're at in the sales process. We're gonna touch on objection handling principles at a high level. And then we're gonna go over some key distinctions of the spouse and partner objection before we actually get into it. And then of course, we are going to get into exactly what to say in the specific scripting. So just as a reminder, where are we in the sales process? We are in all the way down here. So just as a brief reminder, we start off the call, we have the introduction phase, that's rapport, frame the call. Then we go through the information gathering phase, that's where we're asking questions, we're gathering intel, we're learning if and how we can help the prospect, and then eliminating objections before the close. Then the transitions, the transition between the information gathering and the pitch. The pitch is where we explain what we do in a compelling way. Committing phase is where we get them tied down, that is the right time. We get tied down to logistics, timing, any stuff like that before we move on to price. Then we drop the investment. Now we're at objections. Now, some high-level objection handling principles. This is not gonna be an end-all, be-all objections training for every single objection you're gonna get. This is specifically really just for the spouse and partner objection. However, what you have to know is there's three objections. There's uncertainty-based, there's spouse and partner, and there's finances, okay? Uncertainty-based is anything that's keeping them from being less than 100% certain that this is the right thing, now is the right time. I wanna think about it, send me a proposal, let's circle back in 3 months. I need to talk to one of your clients, I don't think this is going to work for me. What if it doesn't work for me? I'm scared, I'm nervous, whatever. Anything that's keeping them from being less than 100% certain that this is the right thing, now is the right time, is an uncertainty-based objection. Now, what are the other two types of objections? Are spouse and partner, which is what we're gonna cover today. I need to talk to my spouse, I need to talk to my partner, I need to talk to my business partner, I need to talk to my CFO, whatever. And then finances, okay? Finances is like, they actually really, this is not like, oh, it's too much money. That's more of an uncertainty-based because it's still, it's coming from uncertainty. Finances are more like, dude, I really wanna do this. I 100% believe that it's what I need to get to where I want to go, but I just don't know how to make it work financially. Like I really want to do it, but like logistically, finances are kind of messed up. So anyhow, I have videos on uncertainty-based, I have videos on finances already. This one's on spouse and partner, obviously. But the key distinction I want to tell you before we get into this is that you always have to handle uncertainty-based objections first. Okay? It's arguable if you could do, you know, if it's uncertainty-based first, then spouse, or then finances, then spouse. I usually, it's always uncertainty-based objections first, getting them tied down that this is the right thing, now is the right time. You gotta get them bought in on that. Then we usually go on to spouse and partner, if there is one, and then we move on to finance is always the final one, okay? So just know that everything you're gonna learn here for the most part is considering that this is the right thing, now is the right time. You've already gotten them bought in on the process that they really want to do it, that they believe it's what they need to get to whatever result that they want. And then we're going to move on to how to handle this, or at least navigate through it specific list. So let's get into it now. A few key distinctions here. This is more so for kind of a transactional sales. So B2C, B2B, SMB type sales. If you're selling companies that, you know, they're 10 to 15 million plus, or, you know, 50 million, 20 million, or 50 million, $100 million a year companies, a lot of this stuff will apply. Like, you're gonna learn a lot of stuff, but this probably wouldn't be the exact process I would use. Like, there's gonna be some different things. Like, especially if you're, you know, you're selling software, there's more adoption, you gotta talk to the IT people and kind of, you know, go through all of that stuff. It's a little bit different, okay? This is more for companies that are probably less than about 20 million a year. For the most part, unless they're like heavily funded and just have a huge executive team, even though they're like a early stage startup. So for the most part, if you're below 20 million in revenue, this is going to probably apply to you. Or if your clients and prospects are, this will probably apply to you. There's also ways you can eliminate the spouse and partner objection before it actually happens. Okay, very, very key here. So we're not going to talk about how to prevent it in this training, but it's preferable that if you can prevent it, you do. Okay, what we're going to talk about in this training is if you don't prevent it, or sometimes it's inevitably going to come up no matter what to do in that scenario, because it is inevitably going to come up no matter how good your information gathering and objection prevention actually is. But just know that what's preferable is objection prevention, not objection handling. Now, we kind of talked about this, but tying down on the certainty of this is the right thing, now's the right time, we already kind of talked about that, that is key. And what I want you to think about before we even get into this at a high level is that we want to get into the objection handling phase with spouse and partner and create what's called a 2 versus 1, which what that essentially means is we want to get the spouse who's on the call with us, or the business partner who's on the call with us, on the same side of the table, so that we both really want to do it. We both believe it's what they need to get to the best next step or whatever they want. And we just got to convince the other person, right? But we're teaming up, right? It should be a collaborative frame, not a competitive frame. So we're on the same team here. Also, just know that after we isolate this objection, we're gonna go into a little bit of a mini discovery. So we got to gather some intel, and that's really all objection handling. It's kind of acknowledging, isolating, getting some intel, and kind of going almost into a mini discovery. And then through your questions, you can kind of basically have them overcome their own objection, preferably. And then also know that, and this is definitely on the far transactional side, but feminine and masculine energy is gonna dictate how you're gonna handle this. So feminine, you know, sometimes we're gonna have to push to a second call or a third call if you have a 2-call close process. Masculine, a lot of times you can push, right? You can 1-call close. And that's not a man or a woman thing. That's like just an energy thing. There's some women who in business are very masculine. There's some women in business who are very feminine, and vice versa. Like, it's just more of kind of what their energy is like, okay? So without further ado, that's just some high level principles, some key distinctions about the spouse and partner objection. Let's actually talk about how to handle it and the steps to do so. If you guys want this document as I get into the scripting, just comment spouse below and we will send you a link. I have a download to this document specifically, and you know, there you go. You're gonna have basically a document that you can have up on your screen. So if you get the objection, you can look through this framework, script it out, read it out loud, word for word, it's going to work. So step number 1 is isolate and tie down, okay? So essentially, and it kind of depends on how the objection handling process went. So you might not start the objection handling process off with this phrase, but let's just say you drop the price, the investment's 10K, and they start to give you some stuff about the spouse, right? They start to give you some objections about the spouse. What you're gonna wanna do is isolate it and then tie it down. So you're gonna say something like, okay, great, so, and no problem. And aside from letting your spouse know, is there anything else that's keeping you from being less than 100% certain that doing this thing, or, you know, implementing this lead generation system into your business is really what you need to be able to get to $20,000 a month predictably, like that you said you wanted, right? So first thing we're gonna ask, so aside from letting your spouse know, is there anything else that's keeping you from being less than 100% certain that this is really what you wanna do and what you feel like you need to get to result, okay? And they say, no, I definitely, you know, need it. Gotcha, okay, so, and just let's pretend for a moment that your spouse was on the call and she said, you know, Bob, I believe in you, and whatever you want to do and whatever you think is best for us in the business, you do it. So let's just pretend, she was on the call and she said that. If that happened, would you be 100% in now? Okay, so what this is here, step number 1, we isolate. Is there anything else that's keeping you from being less than 100% certain that this is what you need, now's the right time, aside from the spouse? And then we say, gotcha. Well, let's just pretend for a moment that your spouse was on the call. She said, whatever you want to do, I'm with you. Would you be 100% in? That's a key language, 100% in. And so that's a double tie down, right? So that's why it's called isolate and tie down. So we're getting tie down number 1 and isolating it, then we're getting tie down number 2. And what we're doing with those two phrases is we're making sure we're eliminating there being any chance of uncertainty. Uncertainty that this is not the right time, or this is not the right thing, and now is not the right time. So we're rooting out those uncertainty objections first before we're going to move on to this and actually handle it, okay? So after we're done with that, step number 2 is we're going to narrow which of the 2 spouse objections it could be here, okay? Because there's essentially one of 2 spouse objections. There's what we call permission and respect, okay? You'll see what I mean. So let's say he's like, oh, no, I'm 100% in. Gotcha, and that makes sense, and I totally get you on that, no problem at all. So just for clarity's sake, is this more of like a respect thing to basically like no matter what you're gonna do this, you just kind of gotta like let her know beforehand out of respect? Or is this more of like, you guys actually have to sit down, have a real serious conversation, and you need to get permission from her so that you can make the decision to implement a lead generation system in your business that's gonna get you to $20,000 a month, right? So you see what I did there is I'm delineating, is this a respect thing or a permission thing, okay? That's a very, 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 very key thing here. So we gotta know, is it like, hey, it's 10 grand, I just gotta like let her know 10 grand leaving the account, but like I'm doing it no matter what? Or like, do we gotta sit down at the kitchen table and like, I gotta like really have a discussion about this? And just to let you know, anything but like, oh no, dude, I'm 100% in, I just gotta like shoot her a text. Or I just gotta like give her a call real fast. Anything but like something like that, it's a permission thing, okay? Any sort of ambiguity, uncertainty, yeah, I think she'll be good with it. That's permission, okay? Then we move on to this number 2, okay? So we're gonna kind of go through how to handle each of these individually depending on what they say. Obviously, this is gonna be a bigger one to handle. This one, like you can probably just close them right on the call, usually, or get a deposit, right? So information gathering. So once we go through this, or once we delineate these 2 things, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask, not all of these questions, but we're kind of just gonna throw out a few of these just so we understand what's going on. The one that I really like is this, oh man, okay, cool. Well, what do you think she'll think about this? What do you think, this one's key. What do you think she'll say when she hears the investment? And by the way, this also works if you're talking to a woman and it's a man too. All this stuff goes either way, right? I'm just using, in this example, I'm using a man who needs to let his wife know. But what do you think she'll say when she hears the investment? Okay. This one's a key one because a lot of times like they're like, oh yeah, we're totally in. Oh yeah, she'll be fine. What do you think she's gonna think when she hears the investment? She's like, she's gonna say it's a lot. And you're like, oh, okay. And now we got to kind of handle that. They just get excited and they don't think about that. So just keep that in mind. And then this is a great one as well. Well, is she, oh, it's probably going to be a lot. Oh, well, was she supportive of you trying to build your business in a way in which it's predictable, you have leads coming in and you're not on that up and down roller coaster? Are you guys on the same page about that problem? Oh yeah, we're totally on the same page. Gotcha. So it seems like for her, it's really going to be more about the investment. Cool. Sometimes you don't have to ask this every single time. Like, guys, this isn't a list that you just rapid fire down. You got to use contextual common sense here. Is she involved in the business? What does she do? Sometimes I'll just ask, like, if I'm selling real estate agents, I'll be like, is she a real estate agent too? It's just like a good one to do. Because we'll try to, instead of asking what does she do, which is kind of like invasive, it's a personal question. Is she a real estate investor too? And if she's not, they're gonna correct you, right? Our human tendency is to correct. So does she know about us, the company? Does she know you're on this call? What does she think? What would she think if she knew you're on this call? And then, potentially you could throw out, can you talk to your spouse right now? When do you think you're gonna be able to talk to your spouse? So you kind of want to use these depending on, but we want to make sure we're kind of advancing it forward based on whatever things we're getting. Now, let's say that we can't get them to talk to the spouse right now, and we're in a situation in which they're gonna have to go away, have a conversation, we're gonna have to book a follow-up, which is totally cool. Like, I close those all the time. It's fine. You don't have to one call close every single person you speak with. In fact, a lot of times if you have the flexibility and give yourself the flexibility to 1 or 2 call close, depending on what's best for the prospect, your overall closing ratio will be higher. So we get all this information, and then we go into this part, step 4, that is clarify and contrast. Now, if we had the respect thing earlier, we can skip this part a lot of times. Like if they're like, oh no, dude, I'm totally in. I just gotta like give her a call. I can probably put you on hold. We don't have to do this part. But if it's a permission thing or anything in between, we wanna do this one. So, gotcha, and I appreciate you being open and honest with me about that. Now, just to clarify what you said, based on where you guys are at financially right now, really any big decision is something that, you guys need to sit down and talk about, correct? And he's like, oh yeah, definitely. Great, so look, I definitely want you to go to talk to your spouse about this, but I want to remind you that there's 2 ways in which you can bring this up to your spouse. Number 1, it can be a conversation where you kind of go up to your partner and you say like, hey, honey, I know that, that business that, that business that I've just spent like tons of my time on and tons of money, and it's just only given us constant ups and downs and stress. Well, like, I hopped on the call with this guy from the internet, and he said like he can help, and it's $10K, and what do you think? Here's the details. Okay, so you can say it that way, or it can be a conversation where you sit her down and you tell her confidently, hey babe, I know I've let you down in the past in this business. And I know despite all of that, you supported me every single step of the way to this point. And I want you to know that I've decided and I've committed to growing this where it should be and already should be. And then I've also found somebody to help us get there. But before I move forward, I want to get your emotional support and buy-in so that I know that we're in this together. So can we go over this? Because I know it's what's going to get us out of the situation that we're in, and I know it's what's going to get us to where we really want to be. Okay, so I kind of, look, like you got to practice this a little bit. I kind of was trying to read it word for word here for you guys. But when you say this part, you see like here, like I kind of hunch over it. I almost make it kind of a little bit of a joke. And then here I almost break their pattern by giving them that certainty, right? Like I decided and I've committed, like they get the point, right? And then I finish it off with this. Now, bring it back to the present moment. Now, let me ask you, which one of those 2 guys do you think is going to convince his wife? And he's like, he'll always laugh and I'll be like, well, obviously like the second guy. Gotcha. You're right. Because if you're not certain about this, then she's not going to be either, nor should she be. Because with scenario number 1, you're weak and uncertain and your direction as a leader and a man, and scenario number 2 is exactly the opposite. And the fact that you haven't been showing up as scenario number 2 is partially the reason she doesn't trust you with this type of stuff in the first place, potentially. So look, the real question is when you go and talk to your spouse, which one of those 2 guys are you going to be? The first or the second? I'm going to be the second. Are you sure? Because if there's anything else that's keeping you from being less than 100% certain that you're going to be able to show up that way, then let's have a conversation about that now and get on the same side of the table with me so I can help you show up that way. Does that make sense? Cool. So you're sure? And so basically here, a couple outcomes is you might do this and you might end up getting a little bit of uncertainty objection of why they're uncertain. We can isolate, handle that, circle back to this, recoach them through the conversation. That's number 1. Number 2 is, like we already talked about this, it's just a respect thing. So you could skip this part and you're gonna deposit close. We'll talk about that. And then number 3, sometimes we can get a credit card. Now, I will just say, I do teach all of this stuff. However, I've gotten good enough to where I just close them right then and there, or I usually, and unless they're like really in, it's just like a casual let them know, I'll take a deposit. But usually it's like, I just close them right then and there, or I build enough trust and communication to where I know I'm gonna get them, I know they're gonna show up to that follow-up. Because follow-ups are actually really effective if they show up. You know, I think that most people, the biggest reason most people have issues with their follow-up is people just don't show. Because they get in this place where they feel like it's like a they gotta come to the call with a freaking decision type of thing. It's like all this pressure, so they just ghost. You know, and you'll see how I book follow-ups later, but you just wanna make it so it's very like they trust you. And it's more about keeping the relationship going and the conversation going, and we can just kind of see where this goes, you know? And I found if they show up to the follow-up, I'm gonna close, okay? Especially in a situation like this. So let's walk through a few of these scenarios here. So this one is, like if they were like, oh dude, I'm totally in, it's just, I just gotta give her a call and she's at work, can't call her right now, whatever, but I'm totally in. Then we do the 1K deposit close. So, I mean, this is pretty simple. Great, and so what we'll do from here is put down a refundable deposit just to hold your spot. And also, the reason we do that is so you can draw the line in the sand about the commitment to making this change that you said you wanted, right? Which you can get more specific there. You can draw the line in the sand, and actually for the first time, you can go from dabbling, like you told me, with the businesses you wanted to start for the past 5 years, and actually drawing the line in the sand, stepping across it, and committing to actually sticking to one thing that's gonna get you to where you wanna go. Right, so I like to kind of regurgitate things they said about the commitment. Like the commitments they told me in discovery they wanted to make, I make the deposit about them drawing the line in the sand and committing to those commitments. Does that make sense? So that's like a cool way to frame the deposit, because honestly, we'll put it down to hold your spot. Like they know, you know, that's bullshit, basically. Like they know that's not true. And it's fine to say it because at least you're giving a reason, but I really like to frame the deposit all about them making a commitment to themselves in the universe that they're gonna make the change they told me they wanted to make on this call. And look, you know, and this is, I get into this next part here. And look, if by chance your wife, you know, you go home and she's like, oh my God, what the F? And she's gonna like divorce you, throw out all your clothes out in the yard. You know, no worries if we could just send that right back to you. We can refund it. You can tell me you don't want to do it for any reason and we'll send it back. We're not in the business of antique marriages. And so we'll go ahead and do that deposit now. And then we'll set a follow-up call to re-review things that your spouse is more than welcome to join if she wants. And then we can figure out the best next steps from there. Does that make sense? They say yes. You say, cool. The deposit is just 1K. What is your billing address? Okay, that is the close. The deposit is just 1K. What is your billing address? So I like to close like that. Now, if they say, does that make sense? Yes. Oh yeah, deposit's totally fine. And then I say, great. Or so here's the thing is, this is what I wanted to say, sorry. Does that make sense? And they say, well, I can't put down a deposit. I usually just rebuttal back, well, what do you mean? Like, we haven't even talked about what the deposit is. Like, I could have said, you know, $100. And I kind of make it into a little bit of a joke, right? And it kind of almost, it lets them know, like, because a lot of times what happens is when you go for this deposit, there's a knee-jerk reaction for them to just say no. So that's why we pitch the deposit, and then we tie down, does that make sense? And then we say the amount. Okay, it's also a little bit of a micro commitment in that way, but what's interesting here is they can't say they don't have the money for a deposit when they don't even know what the amount is. Okay, so you have a little bit of a call out opportunity there if they're bullshitting you, because, I mean, who knows, the deposit could be, I don't recommend taking $100 deposits, but if you didn't tell them at this point, at this tie down, if they don't give it to you, it's kind of like, what's going on? So hopefully that makes sense. Outcomes here is you get the deposit, and then you want to follow up. Like I said, you want to follow up in a way where no matter what happens, they're going to freaking show up. So you want to remove the risk of them feeling ashamed about not wanting to do it, wanting to back out, whatever, okay? Now, if you don't get the deposit, dig into why, and then what you can do is sometimes transition into a credit card close where you just take their credit card information as like a sign of trust, okay? Which I'll be candid, it's okay for some closers to do this just so they can get some commitments. I find I really don't need to do this anymore. It kind of makes me feel a little bit like, it just feels like a little bit much to me. So anyway, scenario 2, you can do the credit card close. Basically same exact thing, but you're gonna say, Grace, what we'll do from here is I'll take your credit card number down, and then even though we're not gonna run anything until you give it a go, this just acts as a commitment that this is something you're serious about and that we're both on the same page. Does it make sense? Cool, that sound good? Perfect, so we'll do that, and then when do you think you'll be able to talk to your spouse? Okay, cool. So let's take that down, and then we'll get a time, we'll set up call Tuesday, what times Tuesday work, and then we'll figure out the best next steps from there. Cool, what's your billing address? Right, and then we just take the card. So pretty simple. And then if you don't think anything's gonna fly, like you don't think deposit or credit card close is gonna fly, then we are going to do the follow-up. And you can also default to this. If maybe you do the deposit, you go for it. They're like, no, dude, I totally understand why you're going from that, but I'm not gonna do it. Don't push them. Just be like, no problem. Then set the follow-up. And then you gotta build trust at the end. So we say this, we say, great. And so when do you think you'll be able to talk to your spouse? Now, when you ask that question, if it's Monday and they say, oh, I should be able to talk to her by next time Monday, you're gonna have to call that out. Because why is it gonna take them a week to talk to their spouse about something they said was gonna be a life-changing result in their business, relationships, money, whatever it is. So if it's anything other than tonight or tomorrow, that is a red flag. You got to address that right then and there. But let's say they say, oh, I'll talk to her tonight. Perfect. Okay, so go talk to her. And then let's set up another call Tuesday to go over any questions that you have, and we can figure out what the best next step is there. Sound good? And then look, if you still feel good, we can definitely talk about getting started sooner rather than later. And also, just to be honest, if you start to feel like now's not the right time, or you want to push this off, or maybe we're going a little bit too fast, no worries at all. Let's still keep our time. And at the very worst, I can give you a little bit of homework and a game plan to be able to work towards some things until you are ready. So regardless, let's keep the communication open, the relationship going, and we can do that until the time is right. Is that fair? Perfect. Okay, cool. And then just book the time, right? So this language here, I really want to emphasize this, that if they show up and they want to do it, great. If they don't want to do it, great. I don't care. I'm removing the risk of it being you better come to the call with a decision. Don't freaking say that, guys. But don't even give off that vibe, because then they're not gonna, unless they're gonna do it, they're not gonna show up. And I'm telling you, I've had I would say, to be honest, once you get good, people who show up to follow-ups, people will show up to follow-ups all the time with me, and they'll be like, dude, I'm not gonna do it, but I wanted to show up, because we had a great conversation. And, I will flip that person into buying then, easily. I would say 50% or more of the times that person will still buy. Not always, sometimes there's some scenarios, but I can flip that person back around, especially if the original call was really good. Now, timing in terms of when you set up the follow-up here, do not do the thing where it's Monday at 2 p.m. and you're like, oh yeah, let's talk tonight at 8 p.m. Dude, he's not gonna be able to talk to his wife, or vice versa. She's not gonna be able to talk to her husband, or the business partners for that matter, right? So, keep that in mind, that I would give them, the 24 hours is usually a good time frame. Same time, 24 hours from now. Give them the evening, he can talk that evening. Worst case, give him 48. That should be more than enough. So whether it's spouse or partner, this framework, whether it's you're talking to a woman, she has a husband, you're talking to a husband, she has a, he has a wife. Either way, this framework really applies. Usually with certain offers, let's say weight loss, where let's say the man is the breadwinner or whatever, vice versa, and the person you're talking to on the phone essentially isn't the breadwinner, okay? If you're in a situation like that, a lot of times you gotta push to a follow-up and really create that 2 versus 1 to close, or get a small deposit as a commitment and then really coach them through that conversation. So that's one thing. The other thing as well is in terms of partners, there's a lot of distinctions here, because number one, it matters if you are talking to the partner, essentially, are you pitching the partner to where the problem you're solving is within his field of expertise? So for instance, let's say there's a partner in charge of marketing and sales. Let's say there's another partner in charge of operations, fulfillment, and finance, okay? All right, so you have these two partners, visionary, acquisition person, integrator. Well, if you're talking to the integrator about an acquisition problem, you need to reschedule that call in the top of the call, kind of like halfway through discovery, and then do a whole nother full call. Now, if you're talking to like two partners, one's the acquisition partner, if you're talking to that person and the problem you're addressing and solving on the call is a lead generation or marketing or sales issue or whatever, it's within his or her field of expertise and domain, okay, then you kind of have two options. You can go through the entire call, create the 2 versus 1, and then do a follow-up with the partner, similar to kind of like what's going to happen in this example. Or what you can do is do like kind of a qualifying call, like a 15 to 30 minute discovery. So you do all of discovery, and then you rebook for the second call with the partner to kind of go over the offer. And then you recap the discovery that you had on the last call with the new partner on the second call, open it up for the partner with questions, get his take, and do a little mini discovery with him, and then pitch. So those are some options there, but other than that, all this same framework applies. So that's it for this video, guys. If you guys want this, just comment spouse below, we will send it to you. And then also we do a free sales course, 30+ hours of content of training setters, closers, sales training, scripting, more stuff like this, all sorts of good stuff that we only give to people who subscribe to this channel. So if you subscribe to this channel, you will be retargeted with an ad to a free course, and it's free, but it's 30+ hours of content of really, really good stuff for only subscribers to the channel. So subscribe to that, comment below, and we'll see you in the next video.